and the witchcraft and where they held the witches and all things in Edinburgh before they burnt them at the stake.
Oh, Lord.
I didn't know anything.
Clear the air with Kia.
I never know where the day will take me. I started in Sugar House, hit a few errands, grabbed lunch downtown, then Park City. I was at the top of Guardsman Pass by 3. The best part, no planning, no fuel stops, and no looking around for charging stations. Plus, I've still got range to spare.
Kia hybrids like the Sportage and Carnival Hybrid go further on a single tank. No chargers, no compromises. Built for real Utah miles, long stretches, big climbs, and spontaneous detours. Find your wide open at kia.com. Kia, movement that inspires.
Did the largest panoramic display in its class help the 2025 Lincoln Nautilus to be named Motor Trend's 2025 SUV of the Year? Maybe it's because the Lincoln Nautilus offers both a gas and an available hybrid powertrain. Perhaps it's the new Lincoln Digital Experience, available 28-speaker sound system, or second row legroom that's one of the most in its class. Maybe it's a bit of everything. Discover it for yourself by visiting your local Lincoln retailer. Lincoln, the power of sanctuary. Class of medium premium utility. Motor Trend 2025 SUV of the Year is a registered trademark of Motor Trend Group, LLC. All rights reserved.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Whether you love true crime or comedy, celebrity interviews or news, you call the shots on what's in your podcast queue. And guess what? Now you can call them on your auto insurance too, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive. It works just the way it sounds. You tell Progressive how much you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll show you coverage options that fit your budget. Get your quote today at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
This, it's just, I know every town, every place has witches, but I didn't realise that this area that I was in was connected to that. And I remember the lady coming down, and the gentleman asking for the lady, obviously, that was upstairs to come down, who was obviously, the lady, the landlord of the restaurant, or what do you call them. And he spoke to her and says to listen, they'd allow them to do to come go at their business and do their things, that we wouldn't interfere so much, if you understand. But what had happened was the lady down the stairs had completely revamped, and it was beautiful. The restaurant downstairs made a bar, always have a bit of a function room, that kind of thing. But what happened, they had disturbed the energy that was in the cellar, and this stirred up a little bit more of a problem within within obviously the energy of the building, and obviously those in spirit that were transferring and coming through using portals or whatever they were doing weren't quite happy with things being changed within the energy. So anyway, they made an agreement obviously with the spirit world. They spoke to them and they said they would let them come and go and do what they wanted to do and do the things that they would obviously not interfere, but they'd always be there, because no matter what happens, this is their place, if you understand, because the memories and everything took place. And I felt fine. I remember coming back, and I remember the lady that was who had been originally in the group. She says to me, Chris, I don't like that chap. She said, I didn't like him. She says, your head was completely black. It was like a shawl or a cloak you had on. She says, and it was completely black. She says, I couldn't see your face. She said, this was in a room that was very well lit. I said, I'll be fine. That evening when I went home, I think it was that evening, the gentleman arrived at my house. And I was very much aware. I could see him standing at the bottom of my bed. I could feel his energy, and I thought, And then, of course, I told him, obviously, to step back, go away, do what, obviously, as we do. And you have to be very strong in those situations, because the spirit will try you, or certain people. If you go to spirit side of life and you are a mischievous person, it doesn't mean that you go to heaven and you become holier than holy. Because if you're of a mischievous nature, you'll carry that, and maybe for quite some time before the energy changes it. And this gentleman came for a few days, and all of a sudden he would appear in my room, and he would just stand at the bottom of my bed. He wouldn't go anywhere else, but just in the bottom of the corner of the room in the bed. And it was a bit eerie for me. But I eventually, and I suppose it was like a battle of wills to see who was stronger. And I'm glad to say I won, But I was telling my guys, obviously, to get this person out of my room. I don't like all that kind of thing. And I don't really think that the gentleman was really there to cause real badness. But what he was aware of, that I could be aware of him, I could hear him, I could, have a conversation with him. He could utilise me to speak through, all that kind of thing. So he was inquisitive too, but I didn't like the fact that he had come back to my home with all my permission.
And I was going to ask you that, how do they know that you can communicate with them? Has any of them shared? Do you give off some type of energy to them on the other side, or?
I think what happens when you become, sort of spiritually aware, or it becomes that kind of thing. What happens is you emanate a white light on behold to us. When you use a mystic light, it's like a beacon, it's like a lighthouse. I think what happens, that shines and it attracts those from spirit side of life. So they know, because they can see the beacon. So they know that when they see that beacon, that person can hear, can feel, or can sense them, so they're drawn to them, to that light. It draws them like a magnet. But this gentleman, obviously, because I was able to communicate with him, and I've never really had a problem, speaking to them, but obviously through my development, but I suppose he just felt that, obviously, because I was communicating with him, he had utilised me. I had allowed this gentleman to come into my energy. I didn't just sit down on the chair and he jumped in. So I had spoke to him, said, "Look, I don't mind you come and utilise my energy to speak, to see what's going on." And I suppose at the time I was quite, eager. I was inquisitive. I wanted to feel it. I wanted to obviously see what information would come forward. But I suppose this was the early stages of my development also, and I was a little bit, I suppose maybe overly keen. And now maybe these days I look at things a little bit differently. Although I'm very much, active within the spiritual community and helping people. But maybe, I'm not so keen to maybe look a little bit more into it before I jump into it.
I want to talk to you about children. Do you allow children to come into your spirit as well and communicate with you?
Of course, well, little Chuckles, who's only 6, 7, 8 year old.
I mean, anyone else besides your spirit guide. I mean, if someone wants to communicate with a loved one or whatever. Okay.
Yes, I remember having a seance years ago in development stages, and I remember all of a sudden I felt very childlike within the energy. And then I mean, coming and I could feel the energy. Obviously, I felt myself becoming smaller, but in the energy, I felt the love. But I could feel it was a young girl had come forward. But what happened was, the young girl had missed the connection. She had passed over, from my understanding, and it even stays with me today because it was such an emotional thing that took place with me because I became part of the energy of that little girl. What happened is the little girl had been a little bit lost, and what happened is my guides from Spirit Side of Life had brought that little girl to me so that they could connect her back into the love of heaven. So what happens, the wee girl would come and she had explained, and she got quite emotional, little girl. She started to cry that she had obviously woke up in the hospital and her mummy wasn't there anymore. She couldn't see her mum. You see, so what had happened was she had missed the connection into the person that was connected and taken back into heaven. And of course, she got so emotional with it, and I got so emotional with it. I mean, I remember the tears strolling down my face, and I remember, the person that was obviously within the group at that time, she managed to take through speaking to me and put the little girl to the light and put her back, connect her with her granny back into heaven. And it truly was for me. It's the first time it ever happened, but it truly was a wonderful experience just to be part of all of that, of connecting the young girl back into the love of her family and the love into heaven.
Where was she until then, Chris? I mean, can you explain that?
She was just wandering.
I mean, here on the earth plane with us.
Just wandering. I mean, just wherever she was, I don't know. I mean, I can't say she would belong to, Edinburgh or whatever, because it was my guides that brought her to me, you understand? Because there's people in Spirit Side of Life have jobs, and it was their job, obviously, to collect this girl and to bring her to, obviously, that seance on that time, for the energy was right, to connect her. But I think what happens, to paint a picture, I on the early stages of my development too, I remember there was a young man. And what had happened was he had come and blended with myself, and his job from my guides, I remember them saying that they were going to put him obviously to the light. Okay, but what happened is the young man had come. I was saying young man, he's maybe, I don't know, maybe in his 50s or whatever, or maybe a bit older. But what had happened was the man had come and he'd obviously started to speak through me to explain what happened. The gist of it was that he had been involved in a car accident, and it was an instantaneous car accident. So it was an instantaneous, well, we would understand an instantaneous death, you understand? But, when we're dealing with the spirit world, these things are not so much instantaneous because we're going into quantum physics. So the spirit world, they have the past, the present, the future, which is all together, you understand? So anyway, what happened was that on the moment of impact, when the people were there to collect the chap, he put his thoughts into his wife and his family's home. So when they were there to collect him, as soon as the impact was there, in the moment we would understand of the moment of the transition to go back home, he missed the connection and he ended up back in his own home. But what was happening when he was in his home is everything was normal to him, but it wasn't normal to his family because he had passed over and he had died. So he had been trying to communicate with his family for quite some time, and he couldn't understand himself why nobody would acknowledge him. So he was in his home.
So he didn't realize he had died?
He realized he had passed over, but he couldn't understand why his children and his wife wouldn't acknowledge him. So the job of the spirit persons, they went forward, Henry or whoever was involved in it, they went to that house after a period of time and brought him into the seance so that they could connect him back into the light.
Wow, that's unreal.
So the spirit will do some absolutely wonderful, wonderful things,
Did they bring him to you? Because, okay, let me ask you this. I heard one other psychic medium say that she believes that they can't be, guided to where they need to go on or by spirits on the other side, that someone here, like physically living, has to, and with your abilities, has to help them get to where they're supposed to be. Is that true from your experience or no?
Do you mean from someone who's missed a connection? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can they be crossed over by, I mean, on the spirit side, or does it need to be someone that's a medium? And
It's a very good question, and to be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure of it. I just know that they bring those people to myself, or other mediums, not just myself, there's other mediums that do that kind of line of work. You know, we do anything to help, you know, the spirit world, to help the spirit, you know, the spirit of the people. But I'm not, you know, I'm not 100% sure. You know, if they can do, I know, you know, from my understanding, that, you know, there is, you know, people's jobs, the spirit side of life, is to connect the spirit. But I think what happens is, if you are, like if that gentleman had been in that home situation with his wife for quite some time, then it gets harder and harder for them to connect, because he believes that he isn't living in the physical world. So when people come from the spirit side of life, I think it's harder for him to see them, because he's not connected into their energy. He's kind of in limbo in between the two worlds.
And I had another great question for you. When you remember it?
Do I remember
what was said?
Yes, of course I do. Certain things I will remember.
Okay.
No, like that wee girl that came forward, obviously, to put her to the light. I remember her. I remember her like yesterday.
But do you remember? I mean, I've talked to one. I've actually sit in on one, and let me tell you what happened. Okay, her name is the Happy Medium. Her name is Pat. She's probably like 80-something years old now. I need to really go do a interview with her in person. She lives here in Knoxville. A friend of mine invited me to go over, and she has a reading once a month, and her spirit guide comes through. She's been doing this since the 70s, I believe, and comes through and just gives advice or whatever. I sat in on one of these, and they told me, they said, I'm telling you, you need to see. You're not gonna believe it. As soon as she sits down, and right before her spirit guide comes through, watch all dogs, you know, present or babies, they'll immediately go to sleep. And I thought, oh no, it ain't gonna happen, you know. So it was a little rambunctious dog running around there, but I don't know what happened. She came in, she sat in her living room right in front of us, probably about 14 of us there. And as soon as she sat down, the dog got comfortable, there was two there, and went to sleep. And when she started to communicate with her spirit guide came in, all I saw was the entire living room filled with white light, and I could no longer see anyone but her, okay? And so I thought maybe I'm nervous, you know, this is not really happening, I'm nervous. So I turned my head to look at everybody else, and I could only see them if I turned my head, you know, to either the right or left. But if I was looking straight at her, I could not see anyone else but her. I'm telling you, it was the most amazing experience ever. But I was going to ask you another thing. This is the reason why I said it. She doesn't remember anything that she says. She doesn't remember anything. So I'm wondering, you know, is it that way for you? She would have to record her session in order for her to realize what was said. I mean, but is it that way for you?
To be very truthful with all mediums, you know, on my thoughts on it, I've obviously done the altar stage for a very, very long time. But there's certain things that you don't remember. There's certain circumstances, there's certain things that took place within saints. I have no recollection of it. I just cannot remember anything that's been said. If you are, you know, giving advice to someone, or you're giving a one-to-one or that kind of thing through an altar state, then very often I will not remember anything that's really been said. I may remember little snippets of it, or even, you know, if you're doing a seance or you're doing, with a group or whatever, you may remember little bits of it, but you're not completely going to forget everything. You know, very often we say, you know, I was completely gone, but you know, if you're completely gone, you know, like 100%, as people say, then you're in spirit world yourself. You're gone. You're dead. Is after a period of time, you just don't listen to it. So our own physical mind doesn't listen to the information that's coming forward because you're at the side. Or sometimes I can be, you know, I find myself walking along a beach, or I find myself in a different place or a different country or whatever, because the spirit will take me. And very often I can even find myself sitting in a library where I may be sitting there obviously speaking to my guides, and I know there's someone speaking through me, but I'm not listening to the conversation. Okay, but very often when we say, you know, when we go into that deep altered state where people say they can't remember anything at all, very often it's the physical side, you know, that of trance or physical mediumship. What happens is they don't really remember anything because, you know, that's what lots of people say. But if you read the books and you do your research, even some of the great pioneers of the past, even when they had, independent voice, when they were speaking, obviously, you know, the spirit was speaking through different voice boxes, maybe multiple. circumstances, even you look at John Campbell Sloan, for instance, who was up for Finlay's, the independent voice medium. All right, what do you call it? But he was, he would actually have communication with his wife. So he would actually speak to his wife. Now, for him to speak to his wife, he had to be there.
Gotcha. Yeah.
His mind had to be there. So what happens with trance or with deep trance is you actually dip in and out. So you go, you disappear, and then your energy will come back up, and then you'll be aware of a few things, then you dip away again, and then you come back up. So even if you look at the books of the pioneers of the past, it's there, and it's written about. People have missed it.
I have a few more questions for you. Now, can you remote view? Could you go and look at an event or something that happened in the past, or maybe even look at future events?
It's a whole thing, but why not? I think is more the question. If you trust the energy of the spirit world, there's nothing. I mean, I remember just speaking to a lady one day on the phone. She's phoning about her child, and I was giving some information, obviously, in the phone to her. And then all of a sudden, I mean, there's maybe about 75 miles between us. And then I says to her, I says, you're in your kitchen. All of a sudden, I was in her kitchen, so I was there. You understand? So I was remote viewing in her kitchen. And I says to her, I see you're in your kitchen. And the lady says to me, how do you know that? She said, just because I'm there. She said, well, if I'm in the kitchen, she says, have a look. I says, fine. She says, tell me what's wrong in my kitchen. I had a look around in my kitchen, and I says, listen, one of your doors has fell off. She says, on your kitchen units. I says, it's down the side. I says, and never mind that. I says, what's actually, I says, within, she says, well, that's correct. She says, my goodness me, that's right. She says, I says, but never mind that. She says, you've got something white that's turning around and about and says, your washing machine. She says, oh my God, that's my bed sheet. I'll see you later. She put the phone up. So we have the ability to go and have a look at certain things. And I often do that with, obviously, I run, workshops and seminars and all that kind of thing. And what I'll do is I ask or look at my students and ask them to open up their minds, to have to look at the possibility of remote viewing, because it can be done. Maybe not to the extent of we look back when the day, people were doing it, obviously, through the Cold War and all that kind of thing, certain things that they've done, and we do know that certain things work. But I'm a great believer that yes, if you train the mind or you trust the vibration. I mean, when we look at remote viewing, for instance, what we're actually doing is, it's not the physical mind that's going to have a look at that. It's the spiritual mind. So what you're doing is you're connecting into the vibration. So the vibration in my room here is the same vibration which is in your home. There's no difference in the vibration, because the vibration covers our whole world as we understand it. So what we do is we learn to connect into the vibration, and I think through training, and through trusting and all these things, you can connect yourself into the vibration, and you can travel into your home and have a look. So yeah, it does happen quite a lot. I don't specialise in it. I don't look at. There's people who do it quite regular. I believe there's groups